Here's a look at 10 of the weakest armies in the entire world. Welcome back to FTD Facts, guys. My name is Leroy Kenton. And now when we talk about the weakest armies, this is different from total military power, which takes the total amount of assets into account also. However, countries fall under the weak category for this episode due to factors like lack of funding, training, and equipment quality. Alright guys, so let's just jump into these nations and their armies. Starting off with number 10, we have the country of North Korea. The Korean People's Army, or the KPA, is among the worst and weakest armies on the planet because of its inferiority compared to other military personnel, since most of their troops are used for forced labor. And reports from 2012 found that most KPA officials were actually either unarmed and very underfed, and they looked just plain weak. They could barely march in a straight line. And on top of that, they also use outdated equipment as well as camouflage that are completely unsuitable for the terrain in the country. And they have limited equipment. Now, it's not surprising that on the surface, North Korea may look like a powerful military country, but their bark definitely is more powerful than their bite. Moving on to number 9, we have the country of Iraq. Despite being possibly the fourth largest army under the rule of Saddam Hussein, Iraq now consists of about 26 units with years of training by both the United States and the British military forces. Now that may sound amazing and awesome, but it's among the weakest armies in the world. Lawmakers in Iraq actually discovered 50,000 ghost soldiers in their ranks, and these were people who would just accept paychecks but never really show up for duty. So this is how back in the year 2014, Western Iraq was easily overrun by extremist groups. Despite Iraq having billions of dollars in military aid, they are among the weakest military forces, which is very surprising. Number 8 brings us the Philippines. The Philippines is a beautiful place for vacation and an amazing place to visit and of course to live. But if they were ever attacked, good luck. With only about $2 billion going into upgrading their country's navy as well as their air force, it has among the weakest of all the armies in the world. Also, they're utilizing 60-year-old equipment, so it's not too difficult to see how the Philippines is one of the most ill-equipped military forces in the world, especially with other countries like China building up their military in the area. Of course, you need to have advancement in your military if you gotta defend yourself against nations like China. Number 7 brings us Mongolia. So being that they are a landlocked country as well, Mongolia has no need for a navy. But despite that, their budget for defense is very tiny and their resources are even more limited. So they're situated between Russia and China, and Mongolia has absolutely no way of protecting itself from Chinese or Russian armies, since it has among the weakest armies in the world. While they may have a highly undervalued military force, the Mongolian forces are very proficient in recognizing and using old Soviet-made arms and equipment. So you see, if a Russian and a Chinese war were to break out, Mongolia would be ill-prepared because they're just caught in the crosshairs of both of these great military-powered countries. The country number 6 is Luxembourg. Interestingly, despite having one of the weakest armies on the planet, Luxembourg is one of the most restful and peaceful places in all of Europe, in fact, even the world. Now, their military forces are a little over 400 soldiers, and about 100 of those are civilians. And given the fact the country is only around 100,000 square miles, it's clear that the military service may not be a priority for their government. Now, Luxembourg's army only has a budget of around $369 million, and on top of that, their air force only has 17 Boeing E-3 Sentry aircrafts and just one Airbus A400M Atlas. Just goes to show you that they're very vulnerable as a landlocked country as well. Alright guys, so before I get into the last 5 countries and their armies, if you've been enjoying this episode so far, be sure to leave a like on this video. And for those of you watching FTD Facts for the first time, go ahead and subscribe and ring that bell because we post videos daily, so come back each and every single day to learn something new. Alright, so the country and the army at number 5 is Gambia. The Republic of Gambia is a West African country, and it's filled with its own civil wars and of course other internal struggles. Now, with around 2.3 million people for a population, nearly 1/3 of them live below the poverty line, and that means that their military is heavily affected by this. Made up of two units, the National Army and the Gambian Navy, about 2,500 personnel make up one of the weakest armies in the world. Their National Army has a few armored vehicles, and most of their soldiers tend to be sent off to other African nations just for peacekeeping missions. And back since the year 1965, they became independent from the United Kingdom, and the Gambian military force has simply struggled since then. But now they seem to be prospering a little bit more recently with Taiwanese donations of armored vessels, which are meant to really replace their outdated Navy ships. Country number 4 is Eritrea. They are dubbed Africa's North Korea. Whoa. Okay, so surprising as it is, Eritrea's armed forces tend to be used for forced labor instead of fighting off other enemy forces. Their army consists of the highest concentration of men in the entire world of armies that are enlisted by their government. Moving on now to country number 3, we have Tonga. Now this country is made up of 169 islands with nearly 103,000 people. Now, Tonga is barely able to enter into Air Force battles since they only have 2 small aircrafts. There's also the fact that their military budget is about $5 million. That's barely anything, and that makes up about 0.9% of the country's GDP. Their armed forces contains about 700 active personnel, and despite this, the fact that their navy consists of 3 patrol boats and a tanker meant solely for fishing zone and border regulations. They fought back in the First World War, and in more recent years, they were sent to Afghanistan and Iraq. Country number 2 is St. Kitts and Nevis. Now this country is located in the West Indies and it's home to about 55,000 people. St. Kitts and Nevis is definitely one of the weakest armies in the world. Their forces consist of about 300 troops total, not to mention the fact that their Coast Guard has 1 boat, which is actually donated to them by the United States. Now on top of that, the St. Kitts and Nevis Defense Forces, they deal a lot with only internal issues as well as policing the waters of their country. And check this out, back in the year 2016, their army only enlisted about 28 recruits total. So we've seen some weak armies in this episode, but none come close to Costa Rica. Unfortunately for Costa Rica, it's among the few countries that have the weakest armies in the planet, simply because they don't even have one. Article 12 of the Constitution of Costa Rica actually forbids a standing military since the year 1949. It does, however, have public force with limited military capabilities, and their main role includes law enforcement as well as internal security and the command of entities like their Air Vigilance Service and their Costa Rican Civil Guard. Similarly, other countries without armed forces include Panama, Vanuatu, Iceland, Mauritius, and Monaco. Okay, everybody, so here was a brief look at the weakest armies in the world. Now, having a weak army, though, does not mean that the country is unsafe and not able to thrive. But either way, leave your thoughts and comments down below about anything that I shared in this episode. My social media links are below in the video description section, so you can follow me over there as well. And I'll be leaving you with a related video. It's going to be coming up at the end screen, so enjoy that once I get out of here, which I'm going to be doing right now. So guys, thanks for hanging out with me here on FTD Facts, and I'll see you next time.